Little Hands, Big Attitude Book 5 The Thief and the Sleeper Chapter 16 Diverted Attention. Agent Tower checked his watch and groaned. His first day in Green Hills, he hadn't been able to unload even one box of his belongings at his new apartment yet, but had already engaged with the Wachowskis multiple times, found another alien, got that alien to the hospital, uncovered possible signs of yet another Robotnik threat to the supposedly sleepy Montana town, and told multiple hunters on his way back out of town to keep out of the woods, getting some threatening looks and clicks of gun safeties in response. Oh, and it was barely noon. He parked his truck at one of the nearby scenic views, climbing out once more to investigate the area. Looking back into the trees, endless trunks and branches lining the road and leading back into darkness, it wasn't too hard to be reminded of the state's tourist slogan. Get lost in Montana, indeed. The conversation he'd had with the eldest and second youngest Wachowski boys about what they'd seen had been both enlightening and confusing. What they had witnessed was a young hedgehog, the same as Sonic and Obsidian, apparently living on board the space station known as Space Colony Ark, and befriending a teenage girl by the name of Maria. The name Robotnik had been mentioned and a man seen who belonged to that name. The station was then attacked by armed forces, who seemed out to take Shadow. Professor Robotnik, Maria, and presumably others all perished, and Shadow was captured. This was way more than anything Tower could have dreamed to get from his superiors or his own grandfather. He'd known that Project Shadow was locked away after an incident, and that most, if not all, information had been scrubbed and sealed to prevent anyone from getting access. Obviously, that hadn't worked, seeing as someone had managed to find out about it and gone in to collect the imprisoned individual. However, the incident in question had always been implied to be caused by Project Shadow, aggressive behavior that led to their sealing, not an unprompted attack that, by the accounts of the Fox and Echidna, Shadow had not even shown any form of physical defense to, instead running for his life. Of course the government would cover up that sort of thing. If the combat boot fits. But also, if Shadow was a hedgehog, was he really a science experiment to begin with?
Agent Tower.
Tower paused in his thoughts as he heard a voice holler from down the street, and he groaned as he recognized it.
Agent Faraday! What a surprise.
Surprise is right.
The larger agent marched up to him, his brows furrowed so deep his eyes were almost hidden. He was trying so hard to look official and important.
What are you doing here?
Here in Green Hills or here on
He looked past the man to look at the street sign.
7th Avenue?
You think this is a game, Abraham? We have a dangerous experiment roaming around.
Tower rolled his eyes. Faraday was definitely very glad to be actually out on a mission and not sitting on standby. The two hadn't been exactly friends back in training camp, but they were on decent terms at least.
Fine. I'm here because our superiors have assigned me to act as a long-term observer of Green Hills local extraterrestrials. I arrived here just hours before you and your troops did.
You are stationed here to observe their behavior? Why you?
Tower shrugged.
It was my idea.
Heh, Commander's pet.
Tower was probably the furthest from being Commander Walter's pet right now, not after ratting him out.
How's it going out there, by the way?
The reports were right. This thing can obviously teleport. We thought we had it multiple times, but then it just disappears for a second and reappears miles away. We thought it was pinned down about 4 miles east of here, but this place, the whole place is radiating the energy now. We can't get a good reading of where it is. Why do you care?
Because I've spent the last several hours since I got here trying to keep the townsfolk out of the woods and out of your hair, and that includes the new ones I was sent to observe. The sooner the hunters can go back out to their deer stands, the sooner they'll stop threatening to make me their next target on the wall.
Yeesh. Glad I'm not on crowd control.
I'm sure you are.
Tower turned back towards the woods.
You'd probably best get back to work before Colby sees you lollygagging and kicking rocks with me.
Right. Dude, you have no idea how hard it is to find something in these woods when you don't actually know what to look for.
Tower nodded as the man left once more.
I may have some idea.
He mumbled under his breath. These other officers were out looking for a monster, when all they might be chasing was a scared little kid. Shadow was starting to wonder if these agents were actually government agents, or a group of Bigfoot hunters who tricked their way into the woods by pretending to be government agents. There appeared to be very little direction to their search, wandering about aimlessly and shoving bushes aside with the ends of their weapons to search underneath it. Every so often, one would claim to have found something, only to be told that it was just a bear or cougar print. Bears were in these woods. Great. Hopefully Shadow hadn't hijacked one of their dens. Once the initial sounds of the human's presence had waned, Shadow dared creep out of the dark cave and out into the cold, snowy surroundings of the woods. He wished he had Rouge's snowy white fur right now. It would make it easier to blend in. He'd slipped the teleportation stone back into his shoe and then crawled along through the trees, keeping an ear and eye out for any of the agents. Fortunately, their uniforms were darkly colored too, so any time that one came into view, he would duck down and remain as still as possible. He hated the feeling of being hunted, but he just had to get out of the woods and back towards town. That blue hedgehog he'd seen might be able to help. He might be able to convince him that they were the same. Perhaps they were. If humans had been able to make him, who was to say that they didn't make more? Perhaps the blue hedgehog was another escaped experiment, like himself. The fact that he kept having visions of him turning gold and calling Shadow's name had to mean something. He set aside asking that question for now. He needed to get there first. He couldn't go back to Stone. He had no idea what might happen if Stone found out he'd bailed on mission, Master Emerald. He needed to find Rouge, he needed to find somewhere safe and warm, and he needed to hunker down until these agents left. Didn't Stone say they were able to track him? They weren't doing a very good job. Then again, the mysterious voice had said that they would hide him. Was he completely invisible? Could he get up and walk without them noticing? Best not to test that theory, not with his leg. He heard a twig snap somewhere nearby, and he dropped down into the snow. It was freezing, but he was too nervous to move, and the chill lessened the pain in his leg. His ears swiveled, listening for further sound. Silence. No sound, but he could feel someone else was there. Did he dare move?
Please let it be Rouge, please let it be Rouge, please.
Hey!
Shadow dropped to the ground as he heard the shout, covering his head with his hands. He saw a man dressed in plaid and with a white beard approach, but then walk right past, a shotgun in hand.
What in tarnation are you hooligans doing on my property?
More human voices began to speak from a distance, and Shadow gave a sigh of relief. The man hadn't noticed him, and was presently distracted by the agents wandering around. They might all be too distracted to notice if he made a break for it. He felt the stone thrumming in his hand under his glove, and he wrapped his fingers around it and closed his eyes.
Okay, take me somewhere safe. I don't care where. Just somewhere safer than here.
The stone hummed again, and Shadow gasped as he felt the snow disappear from underneath him. For a moment, all was silent, peaceful, and dark, and then it all crashed back down as he fell once more. Snow crunched underneath him again as he tumbled down a steep slope, and despite the pain it brought to do so, Shadow grabbed his feet, and tucked his arms and head in to protect them from damage. The problem that stood was that now he had curled into a ball, and balls rolled, and when a ball rolls downhill, it tends to roll faster the further it goes. He had no control over direction, speed, or a way to stop as he picked up speed. Golden sparks crackled over his quills, and then he slammed into something hard. The sparks exploded outward, and Shadow heard a loud, thunderous boom echo out across the woods. He unfurled just in time to see what he'd hit was the thick trunk of a massive tree, a tree which was now falling forward. It crashed to the ground, and then there was a low rumbling from all around, and Shadow gasped as the snow around him started to slide down the steep slope, taking him with it. Well dang, so much for sneakily getting away. He just started a snow flood.
Why couldn't I run home, Mom? That would have been faster.
Because we're supposed to be laying low right now, baby. We can't be doing anything that will tick off Walters as long as his goons are walking around.
Sonic grumbled as he sat in the front seat of his mom's car. Riding shotgun was fun, but not when all he wanted was to get home and start trying to use Rouge's past-hearing power to track Shadow's location. Maybe if they could get to him first, then they could take him home, prove he wasn't a problem, and the government guys would let him stay. Yeah, it sounded even less plausible when he actually put the hope into words. Rouge was sitting in the back seat, now wearing a giant sweatshirt that was oversized even for Maddie to keep warm as they drove. The bat could pull her entire body inside the fabric without stretching it, and she almost was. It was the best they could do in the heat of the moment to keep her warm and out of hibernation relapse. Her arms were crossed as she looked out the window, her big ears folded back against her head. Maddie gave Bat a quick glance in the rearview window.
Don't worry, I'm sure if they'd found Shadow, we'd have heard about it already.
I know, but he's only been out of that capsule a few days and...
Mom, break!
Sonic gripped his seatbelt as his mom looked ahead again, seeing that as they approached some cliffs where the road had been carved out of the mountain, an avalanche was crashing over the edge of the cliffs to their right. Maddie's foot shoved the brake pedal to the floor, but the little bit of ice on the road kept her from stopping completely, and they skidded.
Hold on, kids.
The car jerked as it hit the drifts forming in the road, and then Sonic put his hands over his head as he heard and felt the thump, thump, thump of snow continuing to pile down on top of and around the car. After a few seconds, the thumping faded, and he lifted his head and opened his eyes again. The passenger side of the car was completely enveloped in snow, darkening that side of the car, and on the driver's side, the snow hadn't reached the windows, but it was still plenty high enough to keep the doors from opening.
Everyone okay?
Maddie gasped as she looked around.
Yes.
Sonic responded, and Rouge nodded, her cheeks almost as pale as her fur from fright.
You okay, Mom?
Maddie nodded, and then turned off the engine.
Okay, we're just gonna sit here a minute. I'm gonna call your dad and let him know what happened, so he can come dig us out.
How long will that take?
I'm sure with Knuckles helping, not long. Just sit tight.
Rouge nodded slowly, and then looked back out the window. After a moment, she gasped.
Up there!
Sonic leaned over the center console to look where she was pointing. Up on top of the cliffs where the avalanche had originated, they could see sparks of yellow.
Shadow gives off sparks like that.
Sonic nodded.
Mom, let me out the window. I can get to him fastest.
It's Sonic.
Please, Mama.
Maddie groaned. She hated when Sonic used the mama card.
Okay, but be careful.
She turned the car on just enough to open the window, and then Sonic took off out the window before she closed it again and turned the engine off again. Rouge ducked deeper into the sweatshirt.
Do you think he'll get to him okay?
Maddie shook her head.
I would be surprised if anyone can outrun that boy.